Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 people who were pardoned way too late. When you're innocent and convicted of a crime, you have to rely on the legal system to realize that you didn't do it within a reasonable amount of time. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about people who were pardoned for their crimes long after it even mattered. Like, after death long. People like...
Number 10. Leo Frank. Born in 1884 and hung by a lynch mob in 1915, Leo Frank's death drew attention to the rampant anti-Semitism across the US at the time he was alive. Then again, Leo's defense rested on accusing a black man of lying purely based on his race, so no one here was really perfect. Leo was convicted of strangling a young girl who worked in his factory due to the fact that Leo was the last known person to see her alive and because he had supposedly been flirting with her. We should point out that this girl was 13 at the time of her death. Rather than letting justice run its course, both sides resorted to racial stereotyping. Fearing that justice wouldn't be done, a group which included freaking governors broke into the prison Leo was being housed in, drove him into the woods, and hung him until he was dead. But it's okay because the governor totally admitted some culpability in his death 70 years later. In that time, reams of evidence were discovered that Jim Conlon, the black janitor Leo's legal team accused, though not in the best way, was somehow involved due to him giving contradictory statements, and an eyewitness who says Conlon would kill him if he squealed. Number 9. Timothy Cole. Timothy Cole was a young man arrested on a rape charge. Though Cole had a pretty good alibi, mainly that he was a military veteran with an exemplary record, his prosecutors had an ace up their sleeve. Cole was black and in Texas. Because the victim thought her attacker was kind of dark-looking, Cole was a perfect fit. While in prison, Cole vehemently denied any wrongdoing. Even the victim herself admitted she was wrong and actually joined Cole's family in trying to prove his innocence. However, it took the actual criminal stepping forward and admitting to the crime for the governor to eventually pardon Cole in 2009, which we're sure he would have loved if he hadn't already died in prison 10 years earlier. But here's the real sad part. The actual rapist had been trying to contact Cole to clear his name since 1995. Cole's family only discovered this in 2007 when a letter written by the rapist turned up on their door. This means Cole could have been a free man 4 years before he died, but instead he served a literal life sentence in prison for absolutely nothing. Number 8. Patrick Giuseppe Conlon. Patrick Conlon was a man who immediately dropped everything in his life to travel to Belfast and help his son after he was convicted of taking part in IRA bombings. Conlon, despite being severely ill and not in the country at the time, was thrown in jail with 6 other people, one of which was only 14 years old at the time. But here's the harsh part. Everyone involved was eventually released, pardoned, and given a stack of cash when it was finally discovered that they were innocent. Everyone except Patrick, who died in prison before his name could be cleared. His only crime was caring about his son. Number 7. The Salem Witch Trials victims. The Salem Witch Trials are one of those things that make you wish you could travel back in time and deliver a series of mouth slaps to everyone involved for being so stupid. Not for believing in magic, since that's a perfectly reasonable belief that people believe even today. No, you want to slap them for being stupid enough to believe that people with magic powers would allow themselves to be caught, tortured, and then executed without making a single person's head explode in retribution. Now, you'd think that looking back on all this with modern eyes, it would be a simple matter of saying, we messed up, we'd like to clear all those people's names. Apparently, though, it wasn't. The Court of Massachusetts initially only cleared one person's name, referring to everyone else as other persons. Of course, people pointed out that this was bullcrap, since other persons could refer to anyone and it didn't clear anyone's name, which is important when you're trying to avoid angry wizard ghosts. Annoyingly, it took 3 more revisions and over 300 years just for Massachusetts to admit that no, wizards weren't real. Kids today realize that the second they turn 11 and no owl flies into their bedroom with an invitation to Hogwarts. Number 6. Derek Bentley. Derek William Bentley was complicit in the murder of a policeman back in 1952. To give you a brief rundown, Bentley was robbing the crap out of an English house with his friend Christopher Craig. At the time of the robbery, Bentley was 19. When the pair were noticed, a policeman bravely climbed a drain pipe to arrest them. Allegedly, Bentley yelled to Craig, "Let him have it!" at which point he shot the officer. The officer just shrugged off the shot and climbed onto the roof and began to tussle with the pair. In the ensuing melee, another officer was shot and killed. Though the identity of the person who fired the fatal shot was never discovered, Bentley was sentenced to death by hanging, just in case. Since Craig wasn't 18 yet, he was instead given life in prison. Bentley's young age made a lot of people a little uneasy about his hanging, and a number of people embarked on a literal lifelong quest to have his name cleared. This quest was taken on by his parents until they died in 1970, after which Bentley's sister continued the campaign until 1997, when she herself died of cancer. A year later, a year after his last remaining family members had died, Bentley's murder conviction was quashed. Number 5. Joan of Arc. When Joan of Arc was arrested, almost raped by an English lord in prison, sentenced to death and then burnt at the stake, all by the tender age of 19, the world was a darker place for a while, but don't worry, it only took them another 20 years to realize their mistake. If the church had simply held up its hands and said, "Yeah, we messed up, sorry," it'd be okay. But no, that would have been too easy. They actually went to the effort of giving Joan a retrial in which Joan's own mother had to sit there while the people who killed her daughter to death tried to justify murdering a teenager for little more than wearing boy clothes. Number 4. Alfred Jodl. Alfred Jodl was the German officer who signed the document that signaled Germany's unconditional surrender of World War II. Of course, he was immediately arrested because, well, Nazis. Though Jodl was inarguably a very nasty man, the Allies still managed to give him the raw deal. The charges levied against him were massive, and Jodl was adamant that they weren't true. Regardless, he was convicted of everything and hung in 1946. Later on, as you probably know since you're still watching this video, he was found innocent as a Nazi could be anyhow, and fully pardoned. But here's the kicker. Jodl's pardon only took 8 years to come through. Just read through some of the other entries here. Completely innocent, decent people weren't cleared for decades, sometimes even centuries, while a Nazi got a pardon in 8 years. A Nazi! Number 3. Timothy Evans. Timothy Evans was convicted of murdering his wife and daughter despite the fact that Evans had no idea he even had a daughter, since his downstairs neighbor, John Christie, had offered to give his wife an abortion, which was illegal in the UK at the time. If the previous statements didn't alert you to the fact that Christie was insane, then know that after Evans's execution, he was found to be a serial killer. You may think, surely the police couldn't have known that. Well, while they were questioning Evans, he told them that Christie was the murderer. Searching the home, they discovered bodily remains that weren't from Evans's wife or daughter. The police, presumably thinking this was just a wacky coincidence, ignored this and arrested Evans instead, even forcing him to make a false confession, because going after a creepy, abortion-offering neighbor hoarding unexpected body parts sure sounds like a lot of hard work. 3 years after Evans was executed, Christie, who couldn't look more like a serial killer, was found out to be a serial killer. Evans was then granted a posthumous pardon. His lasting legacy was his contribution to the death penalty being abolished in Britain. Number 2. Jamie MacPherson. Jamie MacPherson was a 17th century Scottish outlaw and talented fiddle player. Why bring up the fact that he was a fiddle player, you ask? Well, that's because MacPherson immortalized his injustice in a song we have come to know as MacPherson's Lament. The story goes that in 1700, Jamie was pardoned for his crimes mere minutes after being hung. This would be tragic enough if it wasn't for the fact that the hangman initially set the clock forward 15 minutes to ensure a hanging would happen and that no pesky politicians could get in the way. If Jamie isn't haunting the ever-loving crap out of that town, then there's no justice in the afterworld. Number 1. Alan Turing. Alan Turing is the person on this list who we know was actually guilty of the crime the courts convicted him for. The thing is, the crime was as stupid as hell. Turing, a skilled World War II codebreaker who expertly cracked the Enigma code, was arrested and convicted of gross indecency because he was openly gay. He openly admitted to this, since it wasn't like he was running around shouting and screaming that he was gay. He was simply an openly gay man, something he rightly believed wasn't a freaking crime. While Turing wasn't executed for his crime, he might well have been. Stripped of his will to live in post-conviction, Turing committed suicide in 1954 by swallowing cyanide pills. He wasn't pardoned until July of 2013, which you might recognize as basically yesterday. And here's the really annoying part. The literal definition of a pardon is the forgiveness of a crime. Granting Turing a pardon was like looking back in time and saying, "We forgive you for being gay, Alan," which isn't really cool.
So some pretty shocking cases there. If you did find this video informative, please do give us a like below. It really helps out, and consider sharing this video with a friend. If you click the share tab below, you'll see plenty of options for that. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, please do subscribe. We put out brand new videos just like this 7 days a week. So just click that subscribe button on the screen now. Also over there on the right, a couple of other videos you'll like if you enjoyed this one. One is the top 10 most unusual prisons, and below that we've got the top 10 prisoners who kept escaping prison, so check those out. I know if you're on a mobile device you can't click on the screen, so there will be links in the description below. And thank you for watching.